Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today we're going to talk about DLC. Yeah, we're going to do a tier list video, and the reason why I want to revisit this video is because Immortal Empires kind of shaped up and changed a lot of factions around. So I want to talk about DLC, which one is worth buying, and why some things have changed in a tier list perspective because of reworks and stuff like that. There's a bunch of DLC kind of ranks up higher now. A lot of the DLC is a lot more worth it. That's obviously a good thing considering that you're getting better value from your DLC, and yeah, even old DLC from Warhammer 1 is still getting updated, which is fantastic. Some of them could do with a few more updates, but hey, we're still in the infancy of Total War Warhammer 3, so yeah, let's talk. Let's go into a ranking, and before anything else, let's check out our video sponsor. This video is sponsored by Manscaped. So, Christmas is coming. You know, the moment Halloween ended, Mariah Carey woke up from her slumber, and now it's time to start thinking about gifts, whether for yourself or friends and family. Now there's the usual stuff, a bottle of whiskey, a box of Warhammer, but why not try something different? Manscaped were very kind enough to provide this box, which has, well, a plethora of different things to help with, you know, some basic male grooming. Just because you want to look like Wulfric the Wanderer on top doesn't mean that you have to look like Wulfric the Wanderer on the bottom. Yes, I know it's an awkward topic, but if you're going to be a little bit Sineshi, and, well, you should be, well, why not keep things clean and tidy? And the Lawnmower 4.0 is perfect for that. It's even got a handy light on it so you can avoid, you know, some blood for the blood god. So whether you're shopping for yourself or for a friend, this might be the perfect gift. And you can get yourself 20% off, free international shipping, and 2 free gifts just by using my special code Grudges, which can be found in the description and on the pinned comment on this video. Thank you again to Manscaped for sponsoring this video, as it really does help the channel out. And now let's return to our regularly scheduled programming. Alright, so like the same as last time, we're going to start with Warhammer 1, go through all those DLCs, Warhammer 2, and then finally Warhammer 3, because yes, Warhammer 3 does have 2 DLCs. Yeah, I know, it's weird. And the usual, you know, S tier is the best, A tier is really, really good, all the way down to F tier. There's a few extra tiers, there's not that much DLC, but the idea is some of them are just better than the others. So with all that being said, let's just jump right in. Alright, so the first one is the first ever DLC. This is the Warriors of Chaos, which didn't rank really high at the beginning because, you know, it was Day 1 DLC, which later got turned into the pre-order incentive. You know, Creative Assembly had to be, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, it was a shit show, and rightly so. Anyways, so this is a DLC that had no attention until recently. Champions of Chaos also came alongside a Warriors of Chaos rework, and had this rework not come, well, I'd say don't even bother with this DLC, as, yeah, it just wasn't good prior to the rework. Now, at least, the rework has made the Warriors of Chaos quite fun. Yes, I know there's some conflicting things here, but I think that they play in a very lore-friendly way, and yeah, it's much better than what we had before, I must say. So keep in mind that I'm talking about this DLC and the rework, not Champions of Chaos. Yeah, you get 3 legendary lords here. You get Archaon the Everchosen, who's finally quite strong, Kolek Sun-Eater, another Chaos Undivided character, and Sigvald, who is a Slaanesh character but plays as Undivided. You just have the Slaanesh mechanics. When you compare both, like really, go back to Warhammer 2 and just play them, and then come into Warhammer 3 and play this. It's so different. It's literally night and day, and I think that this is one of those reworks that come into effect that just show the level of detail that Creative Assembly can actually put into DLC. Obviously, we've had something similar with the Wood Elf DLC rework and the Beastmen rework, but the Warriors of Chaos were a faction that desperately needed to be as unique as possible, just purely because there's so much to do with them. They're such a massive part of the lore, even more than a lot of the other factions, because they are the big bad. The demons are, yes, another big bad, and so are the Beastmen, but the Warriors of Chaos are the ones that are always front and center. We have to talk about things realistically here. Is there value for money? Yes and no, right? So, you can play as Chaos Undivided, but you don't have access to all the Mono God units, so you're very much stuck in Chaos Undivided. If you want the full experience, well, you're going to need your Champions of Chaos and any other future Warriors of Chaos DLC, because the fact that there's still so much missing from the Warriors of Chaos means that they're likely to get more DLC. From a gameplay perspective, can you have fun without the Champions of Chaos DLC? And the answer to me is yes, mainly because the mechanics are just so fun. And yeah, I know some people find that a bit conflicting, but I honestly can have some fun with it. And you're still getting a lot of use of extra mechanics because you're still getting access to demons and stuff, as this is a Warhammer 3 tier list, so yeah, this is only for Warhammer 3. But value for money wise, I mean, you're going to get two very powerful characters. Kolek and Archeon are very, very strong, and they get even stronger as time progresses. Sigvald, yeah, you can kind of ignore him, but 2 out of 3 ain't bad, so I'd say there is some value with this DLC. What I'm going to have to do here is put it on B tier, mostly because you need to have the Champions of Chaos to get the current complete feel, right? This is the thing. Like, it's a fun faction. You can easily do a campaign as Chaos Undivided and complete it, that's no problem, but I feel like you get the most fun when you can mix and match with everything else, right? So you don't have to be undivided, then you can decide to have other armies. You can field your armies kind of like you used to do in the tabletop, which is, yeah, I want some undivided Chaos Warriors, but I also want some Chaos Warriors of Tzeentch as a front line, or, you know, some Nurgle ones for the armor piercing. It's just one of those things that, yeah, you know, just kind of fits with the theme. It's still a very high thing. I'd say that B is really, really good. And yeah, not everyone's going to get A or S tier, but I'd say that this is a pretty good ranking. I think last time I put them on like D or E tier. So yeah, I think that this has already been given a nice push up, and I'm quite happy about this. Next is Call of the Beastmen. So this is another race which got implemented, wasn't really too good, but we had a really cool rework near the end of Warhammer 2, which, yeah, this is a race pack, right? So it's a little more expensive than most. It brings 2 legendary lords, and these are the old formats of the race packs where you wouldn't actually get a full race. You would have a smaller roster than you would like for the Tomb Kings and stuff, and the thing is, it came with a mini campaign, which the mini campaign was great, but the issue is that, well, yeah, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, you know, it's the fact that the mini campaign is only available in Warhammer 1, and I find that absolutely frustrating because, yes, it doesn't really need to be in game free, but you paid for it and you can't really experience it unless you go back to Warhammer 1. So it kind of feels like, you know, you're not really getting your value for money here. Thankfully, this is one of 2 circumstances that this happens, and then, yeah, you're golden, so it's not going to affect every single race. Mechanically, the Beastmen were a generic horde faction, which, yeah, it was fine for Warhammer 1 when the map was small, but as the map got bigger and bigger and bigger, it became a massive problem because it was just a boring campaign. Now, we've got the rework, and the rework makes the Beastmen incredibly fun, which is weird for me to say because a lot of people know that I just dislike the Beastmen in general because of tabletop issues, right? But it's been a thing that's even come to Total War for me. However, if I sit down and think, oh, I want to do something different, I'll happily play a Beastmen campaign, which is great. The fact is that Creative Assembly, again, with reworks, are fixing the mistakes of the past. Yes, there is a bit of an issue here that you're missing a lot of the big beasties, which in CA's words would cost too many Charlemagnes, but we eventually got them in another DLC. But can you play the Beastmen and have fun without that DLC? I would say yes, if you're looking for just loads of screaming goats. The DLC does make it better, and yeah, you should probably get both, but sales for Total War come often, so yeah, I mean, it kind of evens out a little bit at least. Out of the 2 legendary lords, I mean, you've got Khazrak, you've got Malagor, they're both kind of fun. I prefer Malagor because he can fly and he's a spellcaster. Khazrak does need a little bit to make him a bit more unique, I would say that very, very honestly. And obviously there's the FLC Morga the Shadowgave, who is probably the most fun, in my opinion at the very least. But yeah, I'd say that this DLC does have some worth. In terms of ranking, I'm going to put it on B tier. Now, it's a very, very high B. Like, it would be a B plus or borderline A if the faction came with either more legendary lords or more units like, you know, the Jabberscythe and stuff that we got in the future. But if you're just buying it for the Beastmen, like, you get a really fun campaign. The issue is that you're just missing all the cool big boys, right? You're missing the Jabberscythe, you're missing the Gorgon, and those, I feel, are like staples for the Beastmen army. Hell, even on the tabletop, they were crap because the Beastmen were just one of the worst armies on the tabletop, but you could always appreciate a cool-looking Gorgon or a cool-looking Jabberscythe on the table. The same thing in Total War. I mean, it's a Jabberscythe. It looks freaking cool, and the Gorgon's the same thing. Yeah, I feel like these DLCs early on are going to suffer a little bit, and I feel it's a thing. Now, if it didn't have the rework, I would put it down in E tier because, yeah, the old Horde function was absolutely atrocious, but it's getting a really good marking here because I'd say that it's still really fun to play. It's just you're kind of missing out, and you want to have the full experience, you need another DLC. Okay, we're going to move on to Lord packs right now, and we've got the Grim and the Grave. This one's a pretty interesting one, and that's because early on, the first time I did this video, I gave it a really low rank, and it's still a bit in the air. You see, we have two lords which are radically changed now. They've got their own mechanics, they've got their own faction, everything is a little bit better, which admittedly does work out quite well. I'm really happy that these lords finally got fixed up. I think it's really, really important because now there's a reason to play as Helm and Gorst, the absolute nobody, or Volkmar, who's an absolute Chad. Now, the thing is with this DLC is that the new content for, say, for example, the Empire, really, it's just the Free Company militia. Everything else, not too useful. I mean, it is if you play as Volkmar, but that's pretty much it. There's some conflicting things here, but yeah, it's just how it is. And when it comes to the vampire counts, well, the Lord is the Strigoi, which barely anyone uses, which is a shame because I like the Strigoi, but even I know that the Strigoi needed a little bit of a change. However, the units there, you know, it's the Corpse Cart and the Mortis Engine, which are pretty much essential. I mean, the Mortis Engine is just a massive unit, which is really used. The Corpse Cart is the same thing. This is the thing when it comes to these types of DLCs. Sometimes the units are really good, sometimes they're not. Sometimes the Legendary Lord is really good, sometimes they're not. In the case for this DLC, originally it wasn't, but it's better now since they're individual reworks. I wouldn't say that the lords themselves are essential, nothing like that, because, yeah, it's a take it or leave it type of situation, but some of the units there, mostly for the vampire counts, are. So in terms of ranking, I'm going to have to put this on C tier. Now don't do worry, because C is still decent. Keep in mind that there's a lot of lists here. I'd say that if anything lands between S and C, it's kind of worth it, and then go all the way down, that's when it starts getting more debatable. I'm still with the whole thing of Helm Gorst shouldn't have been a Legendary Lord. Despite the fact that he's kind of fun now, and he is fun, I feel like we lost a big name character, a potential big name for Ghost. A lot of the units for the Empire weren't really essential. It's a very strange thing how the early DLC was kind of crafted, and it's just a bit disappointing, but it has gotten better, and the reworks do make them fun. So yeah, you can play as them. I just wouldn't say that you need to outright buy this DLC unless you get it on sale. Next is the King and the Warlord, and this one's a pretty cool DLC because it brings in a really cool rivalry, Belegar Ironhammer versus Skarsnik, right? So Night Goblins versus Dwarves, it's a tale as old as time. It's got a little bit of taste of the 8 Peaks scenario, even though Queek wasn't even implemented yet, which I really do think there should have been a freeway DLC, but hey, we have to make do with what we got. We eventually got Queek anyway, but yeah, so Belegar, interesting character, some mechanics that don't really work too well with him, like it feels more punishing than anything, whereas Skarsnik, yeah, he can't really recruit orcs at the beginning, so you're very much stuck with goblins, but goblins are fine, and you can actually theme it quite well. I've actually gone full campaigns with just not using orcs, just using goblins all the time, and I find it to be really fun. Again, this is a DLC before unique mechanics started coming in. This was like the first unique mechanic, essentially, because you had to capture 8 peaks for Belegar to be able to lose a massive issue there because you had high upkeep and stuff. I don't know, it's a bit of a weird thing, because you could tell that Creative Assembly was starting to experiment, and I think that's a really good thing. Skarsnik as a character is very fun. Belegar still, yes, his campaign is rather short, and you don't have to deal with that too long if you just beeline straight for it, but I feel like there's way too many negatives than positives, and it just makes him not so fun. When it comes to ranking, C tier, but purely because of Belegar and the state of the dwarfs at the moment. The dwarfs really do need a bit of a fix-me-up, even though they've had like, what, 2 reworks at this point. They still don't feel too good, and Belegar just doesn't feel great at all. If this DLC was just Skarsnik, I'd put it on B or A, because Skarsnik feels great right now. He's a really fun faction to play, he's got a lot of theming to it, but I feel like the dwarfs are suffering. The dwarfs desperately need DLC. This is a bit of an issue where, I don't know why, but Game 1 races were kind of ignored. I mean, yeah, we did get that awesome rework for the greenskins, and that's probably, well, not even probably, that's actually a reason why Skarsnik would just be B by himself. But, yeah, unfortunately, it's not great for the dwarfs at the moment, so I can't really recommend it too much. Buy this for Skarsnik, by all means. If you want to play greenskins and you want a goblin playthrough, I mean, you obviously have Grom, but if you want to play night goblins, Skarsnik. Realm of the Wood Elves, another race pack, which probably would not have gotten any attention from me had they not received a rework, because this was once again, like the whole thing with the Call of the Beastmen, a pack that introduced a almost complete roster, but missing some stuff, and only 2 legendary lords, because this came with a you know, one of those mini-campaign things, which once again is a shame. If you want to play that mini-campaign, you have to download Warhammer 1. You've paid for this, but unfortunately you can't play it in Warhammer 3. Hopefully that will change in the future, because some people have been vocal about it, and it will be interesting to test it out with the new rework. That's pretty much it. It's just a massive shame. I loved the mini-campaign scenarios, because it was a story, and it introduced some pretty cool themes, but not at the expense of legendary lords, and not at the expense of extra units. The Wood Elves did kind of suffer for it. Thankfully, the Twisted and Twilight later on in Warhammer 2 did kind of save this. When it comes to ranking, I'm actually going to put it in A tier. Yeah, this is going to be quite surprising considering that we've got 2 other Warhammer races on B, but the change was so drastic that the Wood Elves actually became fun. There was a theme about it, there was an actual structured campaign, and there was reason to stay still in a sense, but without making you feel like, oh yeah, this is just it. The other old form was, oh, you need to go out and get Amber, but you could lose Amber by losing those settlements, or you have to get allies, but you can't trust allies. Hell, you can't even trust them still in Warhammer 3. So I kind of like the drastic change. I honestly was really, really impressed. I wasn't expecting the Wood Elves to have gotten such a great rework, and they're definitely one of those races that I enjoy playing, and with mods they do get a little bit better, but it only just adds in some extra things. They don't need any new mechanics, they're just perfectly playable now. Okay, now we're going to talk about Norsca. So this one's a hot topic. So Norsca was introduced as the pre-order incentive for Total War Warhammer 2, which in theory meant that you could play Norsca in Total War Warhammer 2. This was actually not the case, as you couldn't play them in the Eye of the Vortex, and you couldn't actually play them in Immortal Empires until much, much later, because they had to rebuild the faction from the ground up apparently, and some other excuses here and there. But let's talk about the race themselves. So, this was a cheaper DLC, on the same vein as the Warriors of Chaos, but it was rather exciting to many people, including myself, because Norsca was never an army book. So this is actually cementing them as their own culture. Not represented too well, considering that everyone seems to be chaos infused, and that's not really a thing in Norsca lore, but it's still quite cool, and I was really, really happy when we saw them. This means there's loads of potential for other races, which we've already seen with the Vampire Coast, to potentially have a new DLC. But there were some issues, and this is why. In terms of ranking, I'm going to put them in D tier. And yes, I know some people are going to say, well, they've had a small mini rework. That's not enough. Unfortunately, the mini rework was also kind of nerfed a patch later, which was a massive shame. It's a lot better and it's a lot more fun. Trust me, if they wouldn't have had that rework, they would have either been an E or F tier. Like, high E, kind of low F, depending on what was going to happen, you know? I can admit very well, yes, they can be fun, and I had a lot of fun with their campaigns, but they do need a proper rework, and it's many years that we've been waiting for this. Well, Warriors of Chaos, we've been waiting longer, but with only 2 legendary lords, and we're still waiting for just something interesting, something different. Their faction does lack a lot, let's be honest here. They've got 1 lord choice, they have no spellcaster lords, even though it could use the same assets with a few changes from the hero choice, because that's how it usually works. yeah, they're just not great. Play them. There's loads of mods that actually really make them fun. But, yeah, unless you got this for free, buy it in a sale. Now, there was another DLC for Warhammer 1, and I left it to last as, yeah, Blood for the Blood God. Yeah, it's one of these things. It's a cosmetic DLC. Blood, which should have been in the game from day one, was put into a DLC. And people have said, oh yeah, this is rating and stuff. This was proven wrong multiple times, as many creators, much larger creators than me, have contacted the people in charge of ratings and say that's not the case. That did not affect the ratings whatsoever. I do not feel like this is a good thing. I honestly despise the fact that a cosmetic like Blood, which for Warhammer or Total War in general, has been made into a DLC. It should be in base game. It should always be in base game. The only good thing about this is if you buy it for Game 1, you automatically get it for Game 2 and Game 2 for free. But, no, this should not be the case. It should be automatically in-game. Ranking-wise, F. Hell, Z tier, if I even had the option for that. I do, but I just don't want to make a bunch of extra settings for something that's not going to be that low, other than the Blood God DLC. But yeah, just low. Unfortunately, it's just what I feel. I know some people are just like, oh, it's just €2, but it's the principle of the matter. I already get charged for stupid cosmetics when it comes to Games Workshop. I shouldn't really have to get this from Creative Assembly too. And I honestly don't know if there's any other games that actually do Blood as a DLC. Like, it normally just comes baseline, doesn't it? Alright, we're moving on to Warhammer 2, and the first DLC is the Rise of the Tomb Kings. This is where race packs got a little bit different. Rather than coming in with 2 Legendary Lords, a mini-campaign, and a small roster, this time we had 4 Legendary Lords. We had Arkan the Black, Neferata, Cetra, the King of Kings, and Katep. Yeah, Katep. Anyways, the roster was pretty full, and it came with its own campaign, so you weren't doing the Warhammer 2 campaign, you were actually going for the Books of Nagash. It was themed, the roster was great. Like, yeah, there's some stuff missing, there is some stuff missing, but nothing that a DLC can't fix, and a really small one at that, because the Tomb Kings are probably one of the best races in the game at the moment. They've got a fantastic campaign in general, their mechanics are so different, this set the standard for new race packs, and it's something that carried on into a future race pack too. So I'm really happy that this continued, because Creative Assembly got it right. Yeah, you know, sometimes a company can do something that just doesn't work too well, and then they redesign the plan and it just gets amazingly good. In terms of ranking, S tier. Yeah, simple as that. This is a faction and a DLC that I'll always highly recommend when people ask me directly, oh, I want to buy some DLC, what should I buy? I'll say the Rise of the Tomb Kings, because that DLC has a unique way of playing. It's very different. You know, your troops don't cost money, instead that you're working on a smaller, weaker economy. However, it's much better now since Immortal Empires came into effect, which just made them a little bit stronger. And it's just so fun, it's so different. Plus, you still get the campaign in Immortal Empires 2. You still get the narrative of that campaign, which I feel is quite important, because you can still enjoy the story with it still being and feeling very much like a sandbox. If you don't have this DLC, and I can imagine some people might not because it's still a pretty expensive DLC, the race packs are a tad more expensive, you know, you should, if you feel like you have a bit of extra money, or wait for a sale, but this is a DLC that you definitely should buy. Next we have the Queen and the Crone, High Elves versus Dark Elves. It's actually a pretty good matchup. I actually really like these types of things, because when they go for ancient matchups and lore and stuff, it makes it for a much more engaging storyline. You got a decent story here too, you know, it's the Dark Elves invading Ulthuan and all that type of stuff. You have to kind of defend Ulthuan if you are the High Elf player. You get some interesting units on both sides, and Alarielle's really fun. Hell, she's absolutely terrifying if you decide to get the Sword of Cain with her. I don't know really if anything could be considered essential here. I mean, the Sisters of Avalon, yes, but that's pretty much it, I'd say. Well, the Supreme Sorceress Lord for the Dark Elves is pretty essential. Overall, for theming, it's great, and I'd say that the Crone Queen has a really fun campaign. I really enjoy hers, and she's been getting updates over the times as patches have come in, not only in just Immortal Empires, but also in Mortal Empires periods. She did get a few updates. I will say, however, in terms of ranking, I'll have to put them in C tier. Don't get me wrong, there's nothing too bad with them. They are actually quite fun to play, but I feel like both the High Elves and the Dark Elves kind of need a bit of a rework. The Dark Elves lost a lot of their economy with a new save system, which I like, but it's still noticeable, especially if you've been used to playing Dark Elves for years, and the High Elves have always felt a bit too vanilla-y. They desperately need a few mechanics, and that's what probably is going to make the races fun. Yes, this isn't linked up to the DLC itself, but the fact is that if the races baseline aren't that great, the DLC factions will suffer for it too. It's not a bad ranking either way. C is still not that bad. I just feel like they need a little bit of a fix to go forward, and then we'll see if they get better. Next, we're going to go into the Curse of the Vampire Coast, another race pack which introduced 4 legendary lords and a completely new faction which never had an army book. Yes, they did have a supplement and a minigame too with Dreadfleet, but never a full army, never a full army. And this is what was really surprising to me. I'd always hoped and dreamed that we'd get a Curse of the Vampire Coast DLC, you know, Vampire Coast faction. I honestly thought it was going to be like, oh yeah, it's just an expansion to the vampire counts, because that would have made sense, but instead we got a full race. A complete new race, and I was just amazed. Luther Harkin, a really big character in lore, he's just so cool. Then we had Count Noctilus, which is from the Dreadfleet minigame. Aranessa Saltspite is also for the minigame, though she shouldn't really be a legendary lord here, as she's not a vampire, she's actually mortal, but hey. And then for the 4th legendary lord, we had Lady Diafin, a completely new character, which was created by Creative Assembly, by approval of Games Workshop, of course, and she'd also been turned into canon. She's in Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay now. Now, I've played tabletop for years and years and years and years, so I always had this idea in my head on how the Vampire Coast would work, and yeah, this is literally that. I was so surprised. I was pleasantly surprised. So when it comes to ranking, this is going to be S tier, and I know that sounds a bit weird, but this is a new standard for DLC race packs. Yes, I said that for the Tomb Kings, but this is for stuff that we've never seen an army book for. I'm talking about Ind, Koresh, maybe Nippon, you know, stuff which has been out of the way. We kind of already saw that with Cafe and Kislev. Kislev was a supplement, but they never had an army book. Well, they kind of did with Warmaster, but that's a separate thing. This is just something new and something really, really special. If Games Workshop were very heavily involved in this, well, this bodes well not only for Total War Warhammer, but also for Warhammer the Old World. And I just think that this faction plays very well. They've got unique mechanics, they've got unique playstyle, it's undead but they can use guns. This is something really different to what we've normally known from the undead factions. And it's just great, and I hope that this continues in future DLC. We need this standard to carry on. This is one of the best things that Creative Assembly have done, and I really, really hope we see it more. Next up, we have the Prophet and the Warlord, Skaven versus Lizardmen, another really good matchup, because this is something that you'd see a lot of people use on the tabletop. So, you'd have Ikit Claw with Clan Scryer, and then you'd have Tehenwin for the Cult of Sotak. Fewer units get added in here. Lots of essential ones for the Skaven, the Rattling Guns, the Doomflares, the Jezzails, not so much the Warlock Master, but yeah, you've got really good ones there. When it comes for the Lizardmen, you get the Ancient Salamanders, the Ripidactyls, the Ancient Stegodon, the Bastillodon. These are ones with actual weapon variants, Red-Crested Skinks. You had a lot of units for the Lizards. But all in all, it was pretty interesting. You see, at the beginning, the Lizardmen weren't in the best place because the Lizardmen still aren't. They need a rework. However, I feel like it's gotten a lot better now. The Skaven take the most attention. It's very, very obvious that they get the most attention. When it comes to ranking, I'm going to put these guys on A tier because, well, Ikit is just amazing. His faction is freaking awesome. And Tehenwin actually did get a nice quality of life upgrade when it came to Immortal Empires. So now you get a few more blessed spawnings rather than unlocking Regiments of Renown, which I think is a really fantastic idea. Don't get me wrong, the Lizardmen still need help, but I feel like after the Lizardmen rework, this DLC would easily classify as S tier. Which, yeah, I know, it's surprising, but it's doing really, really well. I'm liking Tehenwin's changes. Ikit just never needed changes anyway because he's absolutely stacked, you know, the nukes and stuff. This is a good Lord pack. Now it's a good Lord pack. When the issue of Tehenwin was arising at the beginning, it wasn't, but this is now considered a very good Lord pack. I mean, if it was just Skaven, and it would just be an S tier thing, but it's a Lord pack, it's a rival pack, so yeah. And now we're moving on to the Hunter and the Beast. Okay, so this is Empire versus Lizardmen, a very odd choice to order factions. So, like, even when I saw it, I was like, well, this makes no sense to me. But it's a very interesting thing. If you want to play Jurassic Park, this is literally a Jurassic Park DLC. There's two things. The Empire gets a totally new faction, right? Marcus Wolfhart has the Huntsman Expedition, and it's completely different to all the other Empire factions, which I think is a very strong point for this DLC. The Lizardmen also get something completely different, as Nakai the Wanderer introduces a Horde faction, but you're playing Babysitter rather than actually being a normal Horde. It's a take of an old mechanic which is not really used anymore, but a little bit better. When it comes to the Empire stuff, really it's just the archers which become a must-have unit. I don't know, I don't like war wagons personally, but I know some people that swear by them, so yeah. The Lizardmen got a lot more units here. While the Empire got better mechanics, the Lizardmen got Dreadsaurians, you know, Sacred Coxigors, which were pretty cool, Coxigor Lord, which a lot of people had been asking for. So this does fill out the Lizardmen roster really nicely. It's nice that the Lizardmen got a lot of DLC, it's just their mechanics aren't too good. In terms of ranking, I'm going to put them on B tier, but leaning quite highly up to A. If the Lizardmen finally get a little bit of a fix here and there, that should solve a lot of issues. I think with Nakai, it's just make his sub-faction a sentient faction, which is just locked to you. They can't declare war, so they can only declare war on stuff that you've declared on. This will easily go and shoot up to A, because the faction is really fun. I really enjoy Nakai. It's just babysitting. Babysitting it just really is a massive issue. The Hunts Marshal stuff, that's cool. I think it's really nice and refreshing when a faction is so drastically different to everything else from that same race, and it brings in a level of replayability. You'll want to go back and play and just try something completely different. So I think that's a really big plus there. Next is Shadow and the Blade, and that was another interesting matchup because that was the Skaven versus the Dark Elves. Evil versus evil, essentially. Well, you know, with the different alignment, it's kind of strange, but yeah. But I like this DLC because, again, Clan Eshin, very different faction. The great thing about the Skaven so far, barring Clan Pestilence, which is unfortunate, is that most of the Skaven factions are really, really unique from each other, and that is really, really fun, because if you're a Skaven fan, you have a reason to play as pretty much almost all of them. The Dark Elves, it's a bit weird. They've gotten better over time. Like, Malice is a tank. Malice is a massive tank. He can be a one-man army. And you get a really cool things, like with the Skaven, you get the Eshin Triads, which maybe not so interesting to most people, but for me it was quite cool, as the same as the Eshin Sorcerer, as those were things from Mordheim. So that gave me a nice throwback. But then you get the Poison Wind Mortars, which, yeah, massive. When it comes to the Dark Elf section, you get the Shrine, I guess. You get the Bloodrack Medusa. I don't know. I don't use them too much. The High Beastmaster, the Master. The Scourge Runner Chariot is quite cool. The Dark Elves clearly got shafted here, and it's very, very obvious because it's what happens with the Skaven. However, if you're a Dark Elf fan, yeah, Malice is cool. Malice has a pretty cool start in the Immortal Empires, but Eshin takes the cake here. In terms of ranking, again, B. Mostly because this is a Dark Elf issue. Were the Dark Elves better, this would be A. Or if this was just the Skaven alone, if we had just gotten Deathmaster Snickich by himself and, well, his units and mechanics, he'd be A tier or even S tier. But we have to think about it this way. There's two different factions here. That's why you're paying around 10 euros. And yeah, I think it's fair to put them in B. Once the Dark Elf rework comes in, it'll get better. But in general, this is still good ranking. B is still good. Now we have the Warden and the Paunch, another great matchup. Not so much because High Elves and Greenskins, because it wasn't that well known, but it's because of the Legendary Lords. Elfarion the Grim for the High Elves and Grom the Paunch for the Greenskins. And I was incredibly hyped for this DLC. Not because this was like one of the first DLCs as a Total War creator where I got early access and stuff. Well, that kind of helps too, but this was the big matchup, right? Loads of people had been asking for this DLC in the forums for God knows how long, because, yeah, you know, if you're going to go for a matchup DLC, you've got to go for something which is just iconic, and this is really embedded into the lore for the Greenskins, and it's just super, super cool. So what you get here is a really cool faction for Grom, because I really like his mechanics. It's pretty different. And then you've got Elfarion, which is basically Batman, but it brought in just a little bit of fun here, you know? And that was really important for the High Elves who desperately needed it. Now, in terms of units, you got quite a lot of stuff, a lot of White Lion stuff, a lot of Lions. The Arcane Phoenix, which really I could have done without. But the greenskins got a lot of stuff like the snotlings, unfortunately just the pump wagons, but you never know for the future. Then stone trolls, river trolls, the rogue idol, which is a really cool Forge World unit. So a lot of really cool stuff all around arrived. So ranking wise, I'm going to have to put this in A. Yes, the DLC was flawed at the beginning. You could basically do a Farian's campaign in turn 1 with no losses. It was a very strange thing, but that since has been fixed, I believe. And Grom is just really fun to play because you can have so much fun kind of mixing and matching stuff and just getting different effects for your armies. I do like Elfarian's mechanics. Yes, the high elves themselves are a little bit boring, but Elfarian stuff is kind of cool. And I think that's a really big factor here because, yes, he suffers, but he can shine bright without it, essentially. We need more of this. We need more really cool matchups like this. There's so many in lore that it would be a shame if we didn't get them, and this is a great matchup. Matchup DLCs just kind of make the game a lot more fun, especially for me. I'm not sure about you guys, but this is definitely a DLC which is like, yeah, this is super cool. Twisted and The Twilight. This is Skaven versus Wood Elves, which many people thought was kind of strange, but this is actually well known in the lore that the Skaven were trying to actually get into the world roots. So, yeah, it's really nice that they went for some really obscure lore. So, this is the one that brought in the fabled Wood Elf rework, right? It was the adjoining patch, but the legendary lords here are the Sisters of Twilight. And then you got a legendary hero for the Wood Elves, which was Ariel too, which I thought was great. We had the Spellweaver Lord about time. Zotes came back. Zotes were a big thing. I was actually really surprised about that. When we got told in early access, I was like, wow, Zotes. We had Great Stag Knights. That's a completely new unit, which is something that we're likely going to see in Warhammer the Old World. And yeah, just a few things here and there. When it came to the Skaven, you know, we got Frot the Unclean, we got Gorich as a legendary hero, we got the Packmaster hero, which was super cool, Wolf Rats, which was something from Forge World, Mutant Rat Ogres, something that's been lost in the passage of time, and then the Brood Horror, another Forge World thing. So this was really, really cool. This was bringing in a decent amount of things for both factions. I'd say that it was staying pretty even. Yes, Clan Molder got a lot more attention because they got all these unique mechanics, and it kind of is like the Sisters didn't really get something too unique. Yeah, they got the Item Forge, which needed to get reworked itself. There was a beta for it afterwards and stuff because people did complain, and rightly so. But I'd say that this is one of those ones where we got really close to the 50-50 margin for DLC Lord packs to be really split in the middle. So I thought that was really, really good. In terms of ranking, A tier. Yeah, no questions about it. I thought this was a great DLC, minus the issue with the unique mechanic. And that's since been fixed, so it's fine. I would say that, yeah, there's a Skaven bias for me. I played Skaven competitively on the tabletop, so it's just one of those things. But the Wood Elf DLC was great. It was honestly only good because you had the Wood Elf rework. If there wasn't a Wood Elf rework, then I would have dropped this down to C tier or something. But this is getting good. You know, the DLCs are getting better with time, and I think that's a really important thing. As we've been a few years into this franchise, we're seeing the DLC quality get better and better and better and better, and it's bringing me a lot of hope for Warhammer 3, even though we're in a bit of a drought at the moment. Now for the last DLC for Warhammer 2, The Silence and the Fury, Beastmen versus Lizardmen. Something that was quite surprising, as we really weren't expecting a Beastmen rework at this point. Like, I'd given up hope, and we weren't expecting Oxyodal. I wasn't, at least, because Oxyodal hunts demons, right? It's his old lore thing, so it was a bit weird when we saw this. However, a Beastmen rework was announced, and we got a lot of really cool things here. Right, so with the Beastmen, we got Torrox the Brassball, a really well-known character that didn't have a model. But we finally got our Charlemagnes. So we got the Jabberscythe, we got the Gorgon, we got the Doomball Lord, the Wargore hero, the Tuskor chariots. That was really, really cool. Then for the Lizardmen, it got really surprising because we got the Coatl, we got the Troglodon, we got the Skink Oracle. So we had two different Troglodons. And finally, Chameleon Stalkers. So this was pretty cool because this DLC as a whole was very well-rounded. Yeah, the Lizardmen need a rework too, but this was very, very well-rounded. So much so that I'm putting this in S tier. This is the thing, right? It was a pure 50-50. Like, Torrox is very much taking mechanics from Lu Bu from Three Kingdoms, which kind of makes sense because really when a lot of us were playing Three Kingdoms, we were like, oh yeah, this would be great for Torrox. Yes, he's been nerfed, but I believe they'll probably just update him in the future. Plus, you know, we finally got the Gorgon and the Jabberscythe, which is a massive thing. But then the Lizardmen came in, right? The Lizardmen, which is a faction most of us were thinking, oh, this is going to get ignored. Oxyodal came in with some really unique mechanics that puts him by far as the best Lizardmen, at least in my opinion. I really enjoy this faction. I really enjoy Oxyodal. I can't say that enough. I was really surprised, and that's a good thing. Creative Assembly, I think, at this point, might have found the perfect sweet spot for Lord packs to make it a pure 50-50. And I really hope this continues. I said it before, they were getting close in the last section, but here they got to the 50-50. Here they got to a really good point of 50-50. And now we're moving on to Warhammer 3. We've actually got DLC, so we can talk about this. The pre-order DLC for Game 3 is actually the Ogre Kingdoms. A very big surprise because most of us were waiting for the Chaos Dwarfs. But kind of works out for the Chaos Dwarfs, and this is my reason. So we get 2 Legendary Lords. We're going back to the old system, which is a bit of a shame. An almost complete roster. There's a lot of stuff which is currently missing. However, the 2 Legendary Lords, Greasus Goldtooth and Scrag the Slaughterer, are very, very cool. Very well known in the lore, despite not having that much lore, but this is a thing with Warhammer Fantasy. Now, I understand why it's only 2 Legendary Lords and an almost complete roster, because it's going to be a cheaper DLC. They're not going to do a full race pack with 4 Legendary Lords and all that, which would be like £30 or €30 or something like that, and then have that as, oh yeah, you get it for free if you pre-order the game, which I think is just a bit an annoying thing, because the Ogres deserve better. They were one of the better armies in 8th edition, and they're decent. Yeah, they've got some glaring issues. However, some things have been changed in Immortal Empires already, where you can get extra camps and so on. But I still feel like the Ogres are kind of suffering at the moment. And it's a bit of a shame because I really like the Ogres and I really want to like them more. But yeah, they really needed 4 Legendary Lords. They said they were going to stick to that format. I understand it once again, my reasonings before. But it just feels like, oh yeah, almost complete. It's like, it's a race pack. It is a race pack. Clearly this means that we're going to get more DLC for the Ogres in the future. Unless Creative Assembly decide, oh no, let's just forget about the Ogre's existence, and I really hope that they don't. But yeah, it's a bit of a shame. For that, ranking-wise, I'm going to put them on B tier. And yeah, this is just me being a little bit annoyed, because really, we should have already had like 4 Legendary Lords for the Ogres, or a complete race pack with just 2, because what we're missing is the Thundertusk, the Yetis. That's pretty much it. It's 2 units, which are likely going to be DLC. Let's just be very honest there, because we're missing Laws of Magic with the Slaughter Masters and stuff. But if they would have had like 4 Legendary Lords, or at least a full roster, I would have put them in S tier. Like, yes, I know there's some issues with the Ogres, but really they're getting fixed with patches, because it's stuff that can get fixed in patches. It's stuff that we all kind of pointed out during early access, and you guys have been pointing out now during the beta series. But yeah, B tier. BTFs, because missing. And finally, Champions of Chaos. Unfortunately, no other DLC as of yet. But Champions of Chaos is a rather interesting DLC. It also came alongside the free Warriors of Chaos rework, but it's not because of that. It's because we got 4 Legendary Lords from this, right? We got 1 for each monogod faction, essentially, even though they're Warriors of Chaos and they're not monogods. You know what I mean? Dedicated warriors. We had a Zazel for Sunesh, Festus for Nurgle, Village the Cursling for Tzeentch, and Valkyr the Bloody for Khorne. Alongside this came a lot of units, which is really, really cool. I know a lot of people complain, oh, they're just recolors and stuff, and yes, they really much are, but that's how it works on the tabletop, and it's exciting to see them. Even some of them have like unique looks and stuff. Plus, we got the Chaos War Shrine, which is just amazing. The main thing here is that we got Warriors of Chaos factions that are divided. You can play them as a Warriors of Chaos Khorne warband, or a Nurgle warband, or a Tzeentch warband, or a Sunesh warband. The idea is that you could just have some fun, and if you played as the undivided factions, so Kolek, Archaon, and technically Sigvald, you could mix and match, which was great. But not only that, but these units also went to the monogod factions, proving a statement by certain staff by Creative Assembly wrong, that they weren't demon factions with a sprinkle of mortal. They're a healthy mix of both. We got something which is what we kind of wanted in the tabletop too. We wanted monogod books, right? So this was great, this was all around awesome. And it's because this DLC did so much that I'm going to put them in S tier. There's a few reasons, right? We finally got what we wanted for the Warriors of Chaos and it helped out the Monogod factions. This also was a completely new style of DLC that we're likely going to see in the future, maybe for the Empire, maybe for the Dogs of War. Hell, there's so much potential with these sub-races because these were actually mentioned to be a new type of mechanic, a new sub-race for different factions. So there is so much potential. It makes me think that so much stuff could be done here, and this is why this DLC is going to be so high up. It's because it brings in a breath of fresh air for a series which already has so much content and is going to hopefully get more, but now we have a new system for it. The Warriors of Chaos feel great too, because by its own, if you just own the baseline Warriors of Chaos DLC, it's not so cool as when you can finally start dedicating characters, dedicating units, dedicating basically your army to be this, you know, to be completely mixed. It's awesome. It's honestly incredible, and hopefully we see more of this. I'm having so much fun, and it shows that there's going to be a really interesting time for Total War Warhammer once we finally get new DLC. And if we can get more in this style, if we can get just more DLC in this type of expectation, because it's getting better and better, I'm really excited to see where these next few years will take us. And it shows that Creative Assembly still have more ideas for different types of DLCs, and that's a great thing. That's honestly a great thing. But yeah, this is my rankings, so you can see what DLCs I like or not. I've played a long time now at this point, right? Like, Warhammer 3, I've got 1,500 hours at this point. Obviously, that's not counting Warhammer 1 and Warhammer 2, and I feel like there's so much more that needs to come. I'm super excited. I'm super excited. It's just a matter of time at this point. But with all that being said, let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. And once again, thank you so much to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. As we are going into a little bit of a drought, this keeps the channel kind of going, so I really do appreciate it. And as always, my friends, I'll see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.